Galion, and welcome to Facebook Live, Galionites and former Galionites and other people looking in on what's going on in our great little town. I want to talk about two or three things, anticipating some questions and adding a little bit of information to what's been discussed quite extensively in the community since the ground was broke on our new playground in Heisey Park. Those people who regularly watch this live stream have seen artist renderings of a park that's going to include a zip line. It's a facsimile of a road grader, a facsimile of a Galion roller, and so it has a Galion history theme to it. But it's what's known as an inclusive park. So one of the reasons it's so large in the excavated area is there's going to be a sidewalk around the entire perimeter. So people of all ages, particularly people with some limited mobility, are going to find this park accessible in a way that we've never attempted in the city of Galion to have what's not known as an inclusive park. So pretty excited about it. What you've seen so far is the excavation, and then just today and over the next couple of days, the installation of the drainage to be able to take surface water, rainwater off the new facility. The next phase of the project that you'll see probably taking about 2 weeks, the beginning of next week, is going to be the pouring of right around $60,000 worth of concrete. So a large concrete pour that will serve both as the sidewalk perimeter, and then there'll be basically a concrete bowl, if you will, into which the toys will be fastened into, and then they'll put in a surface which is unlike anything we've had in Galion, but a surface that enables mobility a lot safer, and we're looking forward to the completion of that project sometime. Unfortunately, it's a little later than any of us had hoped, but sometime in early October, mid-October at the very latest. So I hope that answers a lot of questions. The one or two other questions is, no, there's not extra dirt. Once the concrete's poured and the final grading is finished, you'll see a lot of that large pile of dirt put back in and around the perimeter of the playground. So that and the gravel that have been brought to site are going to be used as the base into which over which the concrete's going to be poured. So that's an update. Certainly answer any other questions that might be out there about the playground. But pretty excited. It is the one major freeze project for this year, and has been unanimously supported by the Freeze Advisory Board, City Council, the Freeze Board of Trustees. So although I'm sure there'll be some people wondering about its cost and whether it might be a little bit too big for Galion's britches. I think it's certainly been roundly supported getting to this point, we're excited about it. Should be done in a few weeks, but that answers those questions about what's going on in Heisey Park. A couple other things I want to talk about before we go to questions. The next thing is what to expect at the depot over the next few weeks. Starting Wednesday, this being live Monday night, starting Wednesday will be the delivery of the long-awaited restroom facility. Certainly in May of 17, when the pavilion was first opened, I think everybody there that day and almost every day since, when you use it, if you have, thousands of people have been there since we opened it. So if you haven't been there, you should rent it or just swing by and take a look at it. They've all commented on the need for a permanent bathroom. And so it has taken longer, I think, than anybody in our office expected, but we anticipate delivery on Wednesday, and with any luck at all, people who have rented it this coming weekend will be among the first in the community to flush the new permanent bathroom. So I don't think we're going to have plan a ribbon cutting or a first inaugural flushing, but it's very much needed, somewhat overdue, and we're excited about what that will do to an already busy rental schedule that we're seeing at that pavilion. The other piece of information that I think is somewhat self-evident, and that's that the depot, at least the top 2 floors, have been painted. Talked a little bit in previous nights about how that's the original color scheme, and we did actually quite a bit of historic research to determine that color. So while it may not please everyone, I think everyone would agree it looks much better. However, on closer inspection, what you see is that the first floor windows have not been repaired, and nor has that part of the building been painted. So we were looking at available resources. It's about $35,000, a little bit more of unused spending authority already set up for the depot. And so what we're going to propose to council in a committee meeting next week, but I anticipate their support, is taking those dollars and some other money that's available in the Parks Fund for land and improvements, and combining that into a project that will be that will get bidders on in mid-September. And what that will do is complete the replacement of all the windows, which will be really a nice milestone for people who are depot advocates and believe it'll be a great resource once fully remodeled. But anyways, it will take care of that, and then it'll also take care of this color mismatch, which is green on the first floor and the correct historical colors on the second and third floor. So anticipate literally over the next couple of months that final step in getting the exterior of that building shaped up and really doing right by the pavilion bathroom. So all that stuff are real positives, and from the point of view of the mayor's office, they're projects that we've been working on for weeks and weeks, months and months, and to see them come into reality is a good feeling. And you know, sometimes you're not sure how things will go. I think both with reference to the playground, the bathroom, overall depot improvements, feel real confident that Galionites are going to see that as money well spent, and the kinds of projects that you like to see freeze dollars go to. You know, once again, they're restricted in their use to parks and park improvements, and so I think there's room for debate, but I really believe we've done a good job of meeting that objective of improving the parks with those dollars. So pretty excited about those projects. I want to report on one other thing that is a milestone, certainly not the completion, but the Brant Road 598 traffic light plods along. We had a bid opening last week. Looks like we have a awardable bid and expect the contract to be signed with the low bidder probably the end of this week or early next week, depending on when that contractor can get in here. So that project, which I talked on these Facebook live streams a number of times over the past few months, that I'd hoped it would be done by November. We have a contractor, and now it's really in their hands to get all the materials and get that signal up as soon as possible. So those are a couple, 3 things I wanted to report back on that are moving ahead. One other thing, if there aren't questions, very hopeful that council will favorably consider the appointment of 6 individuals to the 7-member Port Authority. We still have one more slot to identify that member, but from my perspective, I don't want to lose any momentum that's has been established in moving forward. And you know, it's waited about 6 weeks since it was created, and now's the time to get these people put in place, get their first few meetings going. And so the mayor's office can hand off to them some of our top priority projects that I don't want to see move into a dormant state. I'm not sure if there's a grocery store question yet. There almost always is, but I'll report that situation, the city is trying to move it ahead as much as possible, and there was actually a face-to-face with the owner of the building, the potential operator in the city. Gosh, it seems like it was Tuesday or Wednesday of last week. So I'm somewhat hopeful. The city is described their willingness to work with both the operator and the owner to get this this building shaped up and in a position where it can be open for grocery operations. So just a little bit more to report on that story, and I'm hoping tomorrow night that some of the questions council had about the Galion Fresh Market's owners' interest in the beer and wine permits, as well as being the state's liquor agency for the Galion area. I'm hoping those questions will be answered and we can clear that up. Those issues were real important to who we hope to be the operator of the new grocery in Galion West. So explain that one of the reasons the port's been formed is if we need to, we've got to get a grocery in Galion, and if those entities can't put it together, that the city will move ahead. Our preference is that we would go with the people who are the owner and a true professional grocery operator, but we've got to do something, and so that's really an update on that ongoing issue. And I don't know, you'd hate to get too optimistic, but I feel as good about the prospects of reopening in Galion West as I have in weeks, if not in months. So, all right, so we probably answered one or two questions, but I can see Matt's got several more, so let's go to that.
Yep, and if anybody has further questions for tonight, please submit them now. First question tonight comes from Ada. She asks, will the city ever get a bigger pool, and will swimming lessons be offered in the future?
No, on the larger pool, it's unlikely that we'd have a need for or construct a new pool. I've been watching the sort, if you will, the trials and tribulations of trying to modernize an existing pool in this environment that Bucyrus has gone through. So, gosh, I'm not sure we would want to add on to ours, but I don't know all the particulars in Bucyrus. But short answer to the pool is no. We do realize we need to maybe modernize some of the toys there. We had some issues with the large slide, had to do some interim repairs. I don't think it solved all the problems, but I can see investing in the High Sea Park pool in terms of making it a little bit more 21st century, if you'll accept that, but I don't see us adding to the pool. Now, with regard to the Red Cross, it has been pointed out to me a couple of times over the last several weeks about how that was, how that aspect of Galion, if you will, quality of life is not quite what it used to be. And I want to make a comment. One of the reasons is that the volunteers that you often take take for granted so much, they're not there anymore. So the Ann Mahoney's and the Neil Jarvis's and the Sue Stark that used to do that year after year after year, they're not there anymore. And so I'm not sure, it's probably a subject, Ada, that we would want to have some conversations with the Y about. Because they have swimming lessons at the Y, I believe. I don't know if you get Red Cross badges or not for sure, but that summer free swimming lesson experience isn't there anymore. And I can envision going forward subsidizing with some of our park funds that operation if it takes something to assist the Red Cross in being able to sponsor that, or in conjunction with the Y. So really good question. Sorry about the request for a larger pool, unlikely, but the swimming lessons, it's a tribute to the volunteers who did it, and we really need to make that something that would make Galion just that much better.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Greg tonight had the question on a grocery store update. So for anybody tuning in late, the mayor addressed that beginning at the 11-minute mark. We'll jump on to our next question here.
And I don't, I think it's ongoing until we're opening up a grocery store, new or reopened in what was the traditional location. We really have to follow it all the way to the finish line and coax it along. But we've, what else can I add? If the owner of the grocery would invest in new equipment, which is a big snag, the city would support that investment in a financial way. But it's unlikely that the city is going to buy equipment for the owner and or the operator. Our role would be to somehow support and bring down the cost of that equipment, but I don't see us getting into the refrigeration business. And that's really what remains the key roadblock, if you will, to the reopening is dependable, modern, energy efficient refrigeration and air conditioning equipment. All right, enough on that.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Dee. She asks, what is going in at the site of the former Midland Insurance building?
I think it's not, I don't think, we had a meeting today, Matt and Natasha and myself with some folks from Jobs Ohio, and they were talking about how you can kill a deal by the mayor shooting their mouth off. And I thought, heck, I never shoot my mouth off. That never happened to us. But anyways, I can say without the risk of shooting my mouth off here that it's Chris Cochran and Associates accounting firm. I think they're going to grow a little bit, I believe they've acquired another local accounting business. The gentleman's going into retirement, and so they're expanding and moving up there. And so it's gone from an insurance use to a accounting and for taxes for both private individuals and businesses. One of the good things about that kind of use is that those employees are now, although many of them are right down the street in on Harding Way West, that brings them in the uptown area. And I think it gives uptown merchants, a few more, maybe a dozen more folks to serve lunch to or breakfast to and market to throughout the day on whatever accounts and accountants employees buy during the daytime. So it's nice. It's a good thing to have that kind of business uptown that will support the retail, not instead of just another retailer, but something that can support the retail businesses that are up there. So it's an accounting firm, and we're excited to see them expanding their business in Galion. There's a lot of other places Chris could take his business, and it's a good thing for us. Here.
Absolutely. Next question tonight comes from Maggie. She asks, is there any update on the sports complex at 598 Route 30?
Yeah, the most direct answer I kind of addressed at the outset, and that's what I consider important step at tomorrow night's council meeting, and that's naming the names, appointing the people to sit on the Port Authority board. So what I think happens soon after that, Maggie, is the board will establish their initial priorities. I'm hopeful and will encourage them to make the funding of the sports complex a top priority. If that happens, which I think it is, they'll be making a request to City Council yet this year. I think it's safe to say, or it's not a bet, but I think it's safe to conclude that they'll ask City Council to ask the Freeze Board of Trustees for a fairly significant commitment out of the freeze funds. So my hope is that those 3 steps, the appointing of the board members, Port Authority board members, the request of City Council to support the operation through a freeze request, and then Council agreeing with that and sending on that request to the freeze board. My hope, and what we've been, those of us who are advocates of the project would like to see all of that happen before the first of the year. And so that's really where we're at on it. The footprint hasn't changed much. Let me think, what other smaller details? They're not, they're thousands of dollars worth of expense, not millions. We need to do the mitigation of the wetlands that were identified in this planning process. We know that the amount of money that's going to be required to do that. My hope is, particularly if these other steps move along, request by the port, approval by council, submission to the board, that the mitigation will have been accomplished. And this fall, there's a period of time during the middle of the year that you can't cut dead or dying trees to preserve a certain species of bats. So, and I'm not clowning around, and that we'd like to see the mitigation approved, funded and approved, so that this fall you can begin in earnest to take down some of those trees, begin to clear the site with the timetable for advocates, the people who want to get this done sooner than later, being construction throughout 2021. So that's it's maybe more than Maggie asked for, but I think it kind of covers what we hope are the immediate bigger issues, and then some of the getting the site ready so that a project like this can be built. We're working on that at the same time, trusting that we're going to get support from the other, folks in the governmental chain.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. Next question tonight comes from Chris. He asked, what's going on with all the stoplights not working properly?
I think age. I think the one that's on flash now is Market. They're old lights, and when there's a mechanical failure, it takes a while to get parts. So I don't conclude, there are no plans to go to flash on Market and then take it out like 1 block east on Church. The Columbus, removal of the signal on Columbus was really different than why Market's out now. On the other end of Market, if you will, south down at Atwood, that was studied. We've talked about it a lot, and almost no matter how many times you talk about something like that change in signalization, until it happens, do people begin to react to it. So we had it studied. The engineer for site issues at Atwood and Market recommended that we stop Market. I think locals' intuition was, well, stop Atwood, there's more through traffic. The reason it didn't, the traffic engineers recommended going the other way is because of some site issues. So the one that's on flash now at Market is waiting to be repaired, and no plan to take it down. We've learned just recently what a new traffic signal costs. So at the certain point in time when the Market Street signal gives up the ghost and there are no parts and it's totally obsolete, we would probably be looking at $80,000 to $100,000 to replace that. A little bit less than Brant Road because the poles to which a new signal would be attached are already in place. So yeah, and if there's another one flashing now, I'm not aware of it, but the main one you want to slow down and be more cautious at is North Market. They're right by the library.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. And I want to point out we have a council member joining us tonight. Hello, Mark Triplett. He pointed out that the Rusty Horseshoe down by the bowling alley opens tomorrow.
Yeah, he's gunning for the Chamber of Commerce job, I think, huh? No, I think that's great. I'm glad he mentioned that, and it's been long discussed, and the and going to open tomorrow, and we'll see. I think we almost got to that point a year or so ago, and people's hopes were dashed, and the scam affected a handful of people in the community. But this looks like scam free, and we certainly want to welcome those folks to the Galion community, and I think most every restaurant in town's doing well, and there's room for one more as far as most cooks and households are concerned. You bring on more restaurants, said the mothers of Galion and the guys at home that do the cooking.
All right, thanks, Mayor. Next, I've got a kind of a request for an update from Matt. He asked, what about mowing Powers Reservoir more often?
Yeah, one person asked that. We're mowing it as frequently. I looked at that, and I'm not quite sure. I guess the short answer, we're probably not going to mow it more for the same reasons I said the other day. And I looked at it, I didn't see maybe as much concern. We do mow around the entrances all the way up the side slopes. I think and I don't recall if I mentioned this when the question came up before, but I was talking with the city engineer, and he pointed out to me that we're going to have to take a look at making some repairs. And this was in connection with things that we need to account for or budget for in the 2020 budget. So our attention is focused right now on making sure the banks are there. And, Matt can call us or something. I looked at it, and I'm not quite sure what would be gained if we mowed it more frequently or... But anyways, that's all I got on that.
Okay, thank you. Next, I've got one from Randy. He asked, what about all the weeds on Harding Way East and the old Eagle Crusher on South Market Street? He suggests clean up the city.
Yeah, it must be a Cider Brother hater. We identified two properties. And I agree. The old Eagle Crusher by the old Erie tracks, it ain't that great. But we work with that property owner in trying to develop the east side stormwater system. Down there at that old Ironworks building, I said Ironworks, excuse me, North Electric building. Yeah, that's pretty overgrown, I would admit to that. But another property that has gotten shaggy this year, and the questioner may not be talking both about Tom Sauter owned properties, but the old All Steel building that we've had complaints in the past where the guy wrecked the building, took all the metal off. Guy that's out of Marion that owes the county a bunch of money. I'm going to pass the buck on that. That function to tax foreclose on those properties is clearly the county treasurer and the county auditor, treasurer, and prosecutor. So they know how we feel about that property. And I think it should be foreclosed on for taxes. I don't remember accurately, but that owner owes the city tens of thousands in delinquent stormwater fees. So we've been on the county, maybe I should call them every day, but it's, they know that that's a delinquent tax property, and that property down there that's Pershing to Parsons off of Market, it's gotten to be god awful again this summer. So people down there on Market and Wilson, they're upset again. They probably have a reason to. But the other two properties that were identified are, those are tough things to get at. Very long and abandoned commercial properties. I don't know what else to say. I'll say one more thing. Until I have an idea of what we can do as a community, once you force that property owner to do something, like what, you know, when they get difficult with us, they refuse to do it, then you start to run into legal costs. And until we have an idea of what we're going to do with that property, I'm slow to move on that stuff. I think we have a better idea of what we could do with that property down banded by Parsons and Pershing. I'm not sure what we can do with those other two properties that were mentioned in the question.
And then, same topic, Sheila asked, what about the old East School building?
What we do there is continue to inform the owner via letters to get them to cut their grass at that property and some other locations. And it's slow moving. I'd say the same answer, Sheila, as far as if we as a community or I as mayor knew what to do with that parcel, we'd move on it. The least that could be done is that the grass could be cut and it could be maintained a little bit. But until there's a way for somebody to fund the demolition and bringing it back to some sort of reusable state as a kind of an open or raw lot, or redeveloped lot, I'm not sure we're going to see much movement on that. But I'd say Eric Baldinger, who's really working on this nuisance mowing this first year, has been on it in a pretty big way, and we've actually made progress. Although you identified a few lots with the last two questions, there are some other lots that I'm familiar with that we've got a much better handle on this year. So it's a little bit of a never-ending battle. If you got ants in your house, no matter what you do, there seems to be one more, and that's kind of how it is with these delinquent mowing. But the two, they're not callers exactly, two people that emailed in questions or sent messages in, they've identified 3 locations that have been pretty difficult for us to tackle, and they're right. I wouldn't promise to do a better job, but we're well aware of them, and we're doing what we can in the ordinance without going to court. So.
And then Sheila had kind of a follow-up question related to this. Why can't those buildings be torn down?
I think it's straight expense. I'm going to answer the question by bringing up another example today. We had a conversation, meaning our office, with somebody from the State Jobs Ohio, and it really was about the Pico property. So I get it as far as East School. It is leaves a lot of room for improvement. But I'm also equally frustrated with the lack of support from the state to get the Pico property demolished so that the new owners then can take money and build a new building, build a spec building, and get some a nice piece of real estate so that we can attract some new jobs. So I guess the common of those two buildings is you have to have an end use of sorts for it really to make sense to tear it down. And I would be making a wild guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if the cost of demolishing East School was in the several $100,000 range. And having made that comment, we might get somebody to say several $100,000, not on a good day. But to answer her direct question, the reason it hasn't been torn down, it's very expensive, and the current owner or any public entity really just hasn't made the commitment to to spend several $100,000 demolishing and then removing the material from the site. So, well, is it like, Matt? Have you got an easy one in there? One that I can give a great question, a great answer to? I mean, those are the last 2 or 3 questions have been difficult issues, and candidly, we struggle with them mostly because there's no plan. I mean, you identify it's a horrible eyesore, but for the most part, if the resources aren't there, the money or the willingness to spend the money on the part of the owner, you really hit a stalemate pretty quickly. And we have about $30,000 set aside to do a few demolition sites. And what we're talking about on any of those 3 properties just mentioned is something 10 times that amount in cost that we, the city, have the resources for. So, oh well. Anything else? Is there an easy one in there?
No, that was the end of the questions.
All right. Well, that either happens because we satisfied, or I've irritated other questioners because I didn't answer the last 3. I've tried the best to. It really boils down to resources, and this battle between should we take limited city resources and demolish private property. And it's not exactly a forced choice between that and paving streets or that and doing other things. And we've still got enough things to take care of in the common good, if you will, that need to be prioritized, in my view, before we start targeting individual private properties for demolition. So last thing I'd say on that subject is some of those properties, and if we could spend the next 20 minutes listing all the accompanying properties that an individual viewer listener might think are worse than the ones identified. But what we'll find is one thing in common is that none of them is the property owner in a position either with available resources or willing to tear them down. And so that's where we bump into litigation and kind of a standoff in the court system, and we really need to come up with a plan to get these buildings torn down like we did with the Neff Brothers property this year. But you can identify one property like that, bring some federal state funds to it, but you have 7, 8 more lining up behind it. So we're until some other source of funding we will chip away at it as we can identify local and state and federal funds. So it's kind of a wrap up on that topic. There might be another question. I mean, I feel like what you'll see over the next few weeks between now and the end of the construction season, you're going to see are 3 or 4 projects. Some of the ones I talked about today coming to completion, and others that I've either not mentioned or forgot to mention. I also think you're going to see the beginning of a sewer extension replacement project on Charles Street, which once it's done will be a real positive for that part of Galion. So this is getting to the point where a lot of the projects we've been planning on are starting to come from the drawing board actually into active construction, which is rewarding from our point of view. What else you got?
Okay, a couple more late questions
Yeah.
here. Next one is from Tammy. What about a walking path around town? I thought I heard something about a bike trail in the past.
Yeah, I could have mentioned that. We don't have any particularly good footage. It's a Galion area version of jungle back where the bike path is going to go, and it will take some use back there to get that kind of brought to recreational standards. But if one can imagine, by the entrance of the old junkyard, I want to say 40 yards back in will be the north end of the trail, biker hiker trail, and that will extend through some ground that was traded with the Levant family, the J. Levant. We traded the vacating of some streets for a right-of-way through the old junkyard along the creek, and it will go along the creek back into the city/Avita leased property. and then back over a little corner of a property that we're going to need to acquire from a private property owner. And then the south end of the trail will be in the parking lot of the wastewater treatment plant. So that project, if we were here 2 weeks ago and somebody asked about the biker hiker trail, I'd say, man, we really want to, but it may be next year. I'm reasonably optimistic that we'll get a set of plans from the city's engineer and get something constructed. If not fully constructed this year, at least we'll get the right-of-way cleared and gravel down and be ready for asphalt in the spring. So it'll run from the Bucyrus Road basically back to Hosford on the wastewater treatment plant. Now, what we see that is the first segment of what would be not a bike or hiker trail around the city, but one that in its first 2 or 3 phases would connect the reservoirs with Pico Park. And the last thing I'd say about that I have a strong preference for, and I think other people as well, we don't want the bike path, walking path to be really in the right-of-way of a state highway. So what we're going to do everything we can is to build it on its separate right-of-way, not be invasive to neighborhoods, but to connect neighborhoods with schools, to parks. And really from that point, once we get to Pico and down to Amons and Amix, then other ideas, maybe bigger ideas of looping around the city, people will have enough courage to think that would be a good idea too, and we can gain the support for that. So what's on the drawing board and is hopefully one of those projects that will leap off yet this year is Bucyrus Road to Hosford Road, and we'll see how that goes. We're experimenting a little bit with it, but for many people it will be too short of a distance, and for others of us it'll be just right. So you'll have a little bit of what I call the Goldilocks syndrome. Too short, not too short, just about right. I think when completed, it'll be just about right in total, running from Amons to Pico. So, all right, is that it?
I have one more.
I thought I could talk one more question out of this.
Yep. This one comes from Jared. Is anything going to happen with the cleanup of Kobe Park?
Nothing in the immediate future. There have been some ideas suggested recently. And I know Shirley Clark is continuing to contact folks about developing the water resources, in other words, cleaning up the ponds. But to be honest with you, nothing is in the plans. I'm cool with envisioning it as a dog park and trying to make it happen. But other people who are advocates of doing more with Pico Park are not as enthusiastic about canines and kids as dog lovers are. So that's about the only specific thing I've heard much discussed in any kind of big way. So but I'm optimistic enough to think that there's a use out there, and just because we in this office haven't come up with a good use doesn't mean there's not one out there. So it's a resource the city owns and minimally invests in, and maybe there's a better use for it than we're putting it to. But Jared, sorry, it's on you. Come up with something, because it is an underutilized resource. So, anyways, that it?
That is it for tonight.
Yeah, I really appreciate those non-baseball fans. Actually, I was thinking about this, that the Indians fans are probably listening to us with one ear and watching the game, and they'll replay this later. But for whatever caused all of you to tune in tonight, I really appreciate it, and appreciate the questions, fleshing out some of the bigger things that are going on in town. And so with that, my wife of soon 42 years just showed me it's 5 to 3. So happy anniversary, and we'll see you later. Go Tribe. Good night.